The door slammed so hard the pictures rattled on the hallway wall, my own daughter's voice still echoing in my ears. "Never come back! I don't need you, I never did!" Her words cut deeper than any knife could. I stood there, frozen, my hand still raised mid-knock, as if my body hadn't yet registered the rejection. The basket of her favorite childhood recipes I'd spent all morning preparing, cornbread, just how her grandmother taught me, with that honey butter she used to beg for as a little girl, now felt like a lead weight in my arms. Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in the hallway of my daughter Zora's apartment building where neighbors might see. 57 years old, and I was being discarded like yesterday's trash by my only child. I clutched the basket tighter against my chest. The familiar scent of vanilla and cinnamon, now sickeningly sweet. The elevator ride down was a blur, my reflection in its mirrored walls showing a woman I barely recognized. Hollow-eyed, shoulders slumped, the confident posture my mama had drilled into me. "Stand tall, baby. This world will try to shrink you, but don't you ever let it." Completely abandoned. The crisp October air hit my face as I stepped outside, bringing me back to my senses for a moment. A young white couple passed by, their casual glances sliding over me with that familiar blend of curiosity and dismissal I'd grown accustomed to over the decades. I wondered what they saw, just another aging black woman, invisible perhaps, certainly not someone whose heart was shattering into a million pieces right before their eyes. But then something caught my attention across the street. A familiar silhouette leaning against a black sedan, watching me. It couldn't be, but the way he stood, one shoulder slightly higher than the other, was unmistakable. Marcus, my ex-husband, Zora's father. What was he doing here? The sight of him made my stomach drop, and suddenly I understood far more than I wanted to. The truth had been there all along, hadn't it? The gradual cooling in Zora's voice during our phone calls over the past months, the cancelled lunch dates, the vague excuses. "Sorry, Mum, work's been crazy," or "I'm just exhausted this weekend." Little did I know, she had been making plenty of time for her father, the man who walked out on us when she was just 8 years old, who missed recitals and graduations, who sent birthday cards with $50 bills instead of showing up. The man who now apparently had wormed his way back into our daughter's life while systematically pushing me out. I ducked into a coffee shop around the corner, ordering a black coffee I didn't want just to have somewhere to sit. My hands trembled as I set down the basket and pulled out my phone. There were the text messages from last week. Zora cancelling our traditional Sunday dinner for the 3rd time in a row. "Can't make it. Something came up." No explanation, no rain check offered. I scrolled back further, noting how her responses had grown shorter, more distant. When had this started? Memorial Day weekend, perhaps, when she'd claimed to be on a work retreat, but I'd later seen photos on her friend Taisha's Instagram. Zora at a barbecue I hadn't been invited to. Was Marcus there too? The coffee shop buzzed with afternoon energy. College students with laptops, young professionals in business casual, baristas calling out complicated drink orders. No one noticed the older woman in the corner booth whose life was unraveling. I touched the silver locket around my neck, the one that held a tiny photo of Zora at age 5, gap-toothed smile beaming up at me. Those had been the golden days, when she would crawl into my lap after a long day at the hospital where I worked as a nurse, her small fingers tracing the lines of fatigue on my face, asking innocently, "Mama, why do your eyes look so sleepy?" And I would tell her, "Because Mama works hard to give you everything you deserve, baby girl." Everything her father wouldn't provide. My phone buzzed with a text notification, and for a fleeting moment I hoped it was Zora, already regretting her harsh words. But the name that flashed on the screen made my heart sink even further. Yvette, my sister. "Did you talk to her?" The message read, "Yvette had warned me not to go today." "Give her space, Lorraine," she'd advised. "Whatever Marcus has been telling her has her all twisted up. You barging in there is only going to make it worse." But I couldn't stay away, not when my daughter was slipping through my fingers like sand. What I discovered next changed everything. As I scrolled absently through my phone, trying to distract myself from the pain, a notification from my banking app caught my eye. Unusual account activity detected. With trembling fingers, I opened it, expecting perhaps a fraudulent charge from some scammer. What I saw instead knocked the air from my lungs. A transfer of $75,000, nearly my entire retirement savings, had been initiated to an account I didn't recognize. The transaction was pending, scheduled to complete at midnight. Below it, another pending transaction for the remaining balance, set for tomorrow morning. My mind raced. I had only ever shared my banking details with one person, Zora. 6 months ago, when I'd been hospitalized with pneumonia, I'd added her as an authorized user just in case, as she'd suggested. "Mom, what if something happens and bills need to be paid? Let me help you." Her concern had seemed so genuine then. The pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't just about Marcus poisoning her against me. This was something far more calculated. I left the coffee shop in a daze, the basket of food forgotten under the table. The afternoon sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the sidewalk as I made my way back to the apartment building. This time, I didn't go up. Instead, I waited in the small park across the street, partially hidden by a large oak tree. My nursing shifts had taught me patience, how to wait during the longest nights, how to watch for signs and symptoms. Now I would wait and watch for my daughter. It didn't take long. Less than an hour later, Zora emerged from the building, but she wasn't alone. Marcus was with her, his arm draped casually around her shoulders, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache with old memories. But there was a third person with them, a man I didn't recognize. Tall, expensive suit, carrying what looked like a briefcase. They stood talking for a few minutes, the stranger gesturing emphatically while Marcus nodded. Then all three got into the black sedan I'd noticed earlier and drove away. The rage that filled me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Not just at the betrayal, but at my own blindness. How long had this been building? How had I missed the signs? I'd raised Zora alone, worked double shifts to put her through college, celebrated every accomplishment as if it were my own. All while Marcus lived his carefree life in Atlanta with his new family, sending occasional checks that never quite covered what he'd promised in the divorce settlement. And now they were conspiring together. To what end? The money, obviously. But there had to be more. Back in my own apartment, I paced the floor, unable to sit still. The walls seemed to close in around me, covered as they were with photographs of Zora through the years. Her kindergarten graduation, gap-toothed smile beaming at the camera. High school prom, standing proud in a golden dress we'd saved for months to afford. College graduation, the first in our family to earn a degree. And most recently, her promotion celebration at the investment firm where she'd been working for the past 3 years. In every image, her eyes held the same determination I'd always admired, the determination I'd instilled in her. "Never let them see you break," I told her. Apparently, she'd learned that lesson all too well. I called the bank immediately, attempting to cancel the transfers, but was met with bureaucratic obstacles. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but as Ms. Zora Williams is an authorized user on the account, we cannot reverse the transaction without her consent or a court order." The customer service representative's voice was professionally sympathetic, but ultimately useless. When I mentioned potential fraud, she suggested I file a police report, which would mean officially accusing my own daughter of theft. The thought made me physically ill. What happened next was pure instinct. I reached for the old shoebox at the back of my closet, the one containing all the evidence of Marcus's failures as a father. The child support checks that had bounced, the letters from my lawyer demanding payment, the birthday cards with empty promises. "Daddy will come see you soon, princess." And beneath all that, a sealed envelope I'd never shown Zora. It contained the real reason Marcus had left. Not for the younger woman he'd eventually married, as I'd allowed Zora to believe, but because of his involvement in a real estate scheme that had defrauded dozens of families in our community. I'd discovered the evidence accidentally, and when confronted, he'd chosen to leave rather than face potential consequences. I'd kept it secret to protect Zora from knowing her father was not just absent, but corrupt. My hands trembled as I broke the seal on the envelope for the first time in nearly 20 years. The documents inside were yellowed but legible. Bank statements showing large, unexplained deposits, emails discussing marks and payouts, and most damning, a list of families who'd lost their homes due to his predatory practices. Many of them people from our own church congregation, people who'd trusted him because of his connection to us. People who, to this day, still greeted me with strained smiles at community events, too polite to mention how my ex-husband had ruined their lives. A plan began forming in my mind. Not revenge exactly, but justice, for myself and for others. I made 3 quick calls. The first to Yvette, who answered immediately, as if she'd been waiting by the phone. "It's worse than we thought," I told her, explaining about the money. Her sharp intake of breath told me everything. "You were right about giving her space," I admitted, "but now I need your help." The second call was to Reverend James at our church, who had counseled me through the divorce and knew some of what Marcus had done. The third was to Detective Michaels, now retired, who had investigated the complaints against Marcus years ago, but never had enough evidence to bring charges. By nightfall, I had assembled a small group in my living room. Yvette, fierce and protective as always. Reverend James, his normally jovial face solemn. Detective Michaels, whose interest had immediately rekindled at the mention of Marcus Williams. And most surprisingly, Mrs. Gladys Taylor, our former neighbor, whose family had lost their home due to Marcus's scheme, the only victim who had ever directly confronted me about what happened. "I never blamed you, Lorraine," she said quietly, her aged hand covering mine. "But that man has hurt enough people. It's time." Together, we pieced together what was happening. Marcus hadn't just reappeared in Zora's life by chance. The real estate market was booming again, and he was running a new version of his old scheme. But this time, he needed a legitimate front. Someone with actual credentials in finance. Someone like Zora, who had built a respectable career and had no connection to his previous frauds. The man in the suit was likely another investor or co-conspirator. And my retirement savings, just the beginning. Seed money to establish credibility for whatever they were planning. "But why would Zora agree to this?" Yvette asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. "That girl worshipped the ground you walked on." The answer came from Mrs. Taylor, whose wisdom had always cut straight to the heart of matters. "Because that girl never knew the truth about her daddy. She's been filling in the blanks with fantasy all these years, and now he's telling her exactly what she wants to hear." She looked at me pointedly. "You protected her from the truth, Lorraine. But sometimes protection becomes a prison of its own." She was right, of course. In trying to shield Zora from pain, I created the perfect environment for Marcus's manipulation. He'd likely told her some version of events that cast me as the villain. Perhaps claiming I'd kept them apart out of spite, or that I'd mismanaged the money he'd sent for her care. Without the full truth, how could she know what to believe? Detective Michaels leafed through the old documents, excitement growing in his eyes. "This isn't just about your money anymore, Lorraine. If he's running the same scheme, there are likely new victims already. And with these documents connecting him to the previous fraud," he looked up, "we might finally have enough to stop him." The plan came together quickly. Detective Michaels would contact former colleagues still on the force. Reverend James would reach out to community members who might have been approached about Marcus's new investment opportunity. Mrs. Taylor would provide her testimony, and I would confront Zora, not with accusations, but with the truth, all of it. But first, I had one more call to make. Using Yvette's phone rather than my own, I called Taisha, Zora's best friend since college. After assuring her I was okay, despite the argument Zora had surely mentioned, I asked casually about the Memorial Day barbecue. As I suspected, Marcus had been there, his first appearance in Zora's social circle. "It was weird, Ms. Lorraine," Taisha admitted. He showed up with all these stories about trying to find Zora for years, saying you'd hidden his letters and returned his calls. Her voice dropped lower. I tried to tell Zora that didn't sound like you, but she was so excited to have him back in her life. And then he started talking about this investment opportunity that could make her partner at the firm. The final piece clicked into place. Marcus hadn't just manipulated Zora's emotions. He dangled professional advancement as well. My daughter's ambition had always been her strength, but it could be her vulnerability too. She wanted success so badly, had worked so hard for it, that the promise of a shortcut would be nearly irresistible, especially when it came from the father she'd idolized in absence. Morning came too quickly after a sleepless night of preparation. At precisely 9 a.m., I stood once again outside Zora's apartment building, but this time I wasn't alone. Yvette was with me, along with Detective Michaels. Reverend James and Mrs. Taylor waited in a car nearby, ready if needed. My heart hammered in my chest as I pressed the buzzer, half expecting to be ignored. But after a moment, Zora's voice came through the speaker, surprise evident even through the electronic distortion. "Mom, what are you doing back here? We need to talk, Zora. It's important." I kept my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. "Please." A long pause. Then the door buzzed open. In the elevator, Yvette squeezed my hand. "Remember," she whispered, "this isn't just about the money. This is about saving her from making a mistake she'll regret for the rest of her life." When the apartment door opened, Zora's expression was a mask of cold hostility, so different from the warm, loving daughter I'd raised that it physically hurt to see. She was already dressed for work in a tailored suit, hair pulled back severely from her face. "I thought I made myself clear yesterday," she said, not moving to let us in. Then her eyes fell on Detective Michaels, confusion momentarily replacing anger. "Who's this?" "Someone who knows your father better than you do," I replied, my voice gentle despite everything. "Please, Zora, 15 minutes, that's all I'm asking." Perhaps it was the presence of others that made her relent. Or maybe some small part of her still wanted to believe there was an explanation for everything. Regardless, she stepped aside, allowing us to enter the stylish apartment I'd helped her decorate just last year. Family photos were conspicuously absent from the walls now, replaced by abstract art that seemed to reflect the emotional distance between us. "Whatever this is about, make it quick. I have a meeting," Zora began, but stopped short when Detective Michaels placed the folder of documents on her glass coffee table. "With your father and his associate, Mr. Donovan?" the detective asked mildly. "Yes, we know all about that meeting. In fact, some of my former colleagues might be attending as well." The color drained from Zora's face. "I don't know what you think is happening, but—" "The transfers, Zora," I interrupted quietly. "From my account to whatever account you and your father set up. I know about them." Her expression flickered, shock, guilt, then a rapid attempt to recover. "That money is rightfully mine," she said, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "Dad told me how you kept his child support all these years, how you used it for yourself instead of me. I'm just taking what should have been mine anyway." Yvette made a sound of disgust, but I silenced her with a look. This was between me and my daughter. "Is that what he told you?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "That he faithfully sent child support that I somehow misused?" I opened the shoebox I'd brought, removing the stack of bounced check notices. "Here's the reality, Zora. Your father sent exactly 17 checks over 10 years. 11 of them bounced. The total amount I received from him wouldn't have covered 3 months of your dance lessons, let alone everything else." Zora's eyes fixed on the papers, her composure wavering. "He said you kept him away, that you threatened him. With what?" I challenged gently. "What power did I have over him? I was a nurse making barely enough to keep us afloat. He was the one who chose to leave." "Because you drove him away." The words burst from her like they'd been rehearsed, probably because they had been, fed to her by Marcus over months of careful manipulation. Detective Michaels cleared his throat. "Ms. Williams, do you know what your father was doing before he left Atlanta 20 years ago? Did he tell you why he really disappeared from your life? Her eyes darted between us, uncertainty creeping in. He had to leave because of business troubles. He tried to stay in touch, but Mom, your father defrauded over 30 families in our community, I said, the words heavy with years of suppressed truth. People we knew, people from church, people who trusted him because he was your father, my husband. I gestured to the documents. It's all there, bank records, emails, victim statements. He took their money, promised them homes, and left them with nothing. Zora shook her head violently. No, that's not. He wouldn't. One of those families was the Taylors, I continued, my heart breaking at the confusion and pain crossing her face. Remember Mrs. Taylor, how she used to give you those lemon cookies after school. They lost everything because of what your father did. Their son had to drop out of college. Mr. Taylor had a heart attack from the stress. You're lying, Zora whispered, but there was no conviction in it. She reached for the documents with trembling hands, flipping through them as if searching for evidence of forgery. Finding none, she sank onto the couch, the perfect posture she'd maintained, crumbling along with her certainty. I kept this from you because I wanted you to have something of your father to hold on to, I said, sitting beside her, not touching her yet. I thought knowing he'd chosen to leave was painful enough, without adding that he'd also betrayed everyone who trusted him. I thought I was protecting you. I took a deep breath. That was my mistake. By hiding the truth, I left you vulnerable to his lies. Detective Michael stepped forward, his voice professionally gentle but firm. Ms. Williams, we have reason to believe your father is using you and your professional credentials to restart his old scheme. The man you've been meeting with, Gerald Donovan, has a record of securities fraud in 2 states. Whatever they've told you about this investment opportunity, I guarantee it's not legitimate. Zora looked up, her eyes haunted. The Westlake Project, she murmured. Dad said it was going to transform the old neighborhood, bring in affordable housing. She pressed her hands to her mouth. He needed an inside connection at my firm to fast-track the financing. And her voice broke. I've already brought in 3 clients. Their money isn't gone yet, Detective Michaels assured her. If you cooperate, we can freeze those transactions before anyone loses anything, but we need to move quickly. What happened next shattered and healed my heart in equal measure. Zora looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since I'd entered. The anger was gone, replaced by confusion and dawning horror. Mum, she whispered, what have I done? I moved then, wrapping my arms around her as she began to sob, great heaving cries that shook her entire body. It's not your fault, I murmured into her hair, breathing in the familiar scent of the coconut oil I'd taught her to use when she was just a girl. He fooled a lot of people. He's very good at it. But I was so cruel to you, she choked out. The things I said yesterday, and the money. We'll handle the money, I assured her, though in truth I wasn't certain how. What matters is stopping him before more people get hurt. Detective Michaels discreetly stepped out to make some calls, while Yvette moved to the kitchen to make tea, her solution to every crisis since we were children. Left relatively alone, Zora pulled back to look at my face, her own streaked with tears and makeup. How can you even look at me right now, she asked, genuine bewilderment in her voice. After what I tried to do, I cupped her face in my hands, the way I used to when she was small and needed reassurance. Because you're my daughter, my blood, my heart walking around outside my body. Nothing changes that. I wiped a tear from her cheek. And because I know the real you, not this person your father temporarily convinced you to be. Her next words came out in a broken whisper. I was so angry at you for so long, for keeping him away from me, for making me the kid without a dad. When he showed up and told me his side of things, it was like everything finally made sense. All those years of feeling abandoned. She shook her head. But it was him, it was always him, who abandoned us. Yes, I said simply. It was. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Zora called her firm's compliance officer, triggering an immediate internal investigation. Detective Michaels brought in active duty officers who took her statement. The bank was contacted to freeze not only my accounts, but also the suspicious ones connected to Marcus and Donovan. And through it all, Zora stayed close to my side, as if afraid I might disappear if she looked away. By mid-afternoon, word came that Marcus and Donovan had been taken into custody while attempting to access the business accounts they'd set up. Apparently, when they couldn't reach Zora and realized the transfers from my account hadn't completed, they'd panicked and tried to flee with what money they'd already collected. It was over. In my sister's car, driving back to my apartment, where we would begin the process of sorting through the emotional and financial aftermath, Zora suddenly reached for my hand. "I don't understand how you can forgive me so easily," she said quietly. "I wouldn't forgive me." I considered this for a moment, watching the familiar streets pass by outside the window. "Do you remember when you were about 6 and you got into my makeup before church, ruined my favorite lipstick, and got red all over your Sunday dress?" A small, watery smile appeared on her face. "You were so mad." "I was. But do you remember what I did? You cleaned me up, got the stains out as best you could, made me promise to ask before touching your things again." I nodded. "That's what mothers do, Zora. We clean up messes, we forgive, we teach, and then we move forward." I squeezed her hand. "You made a mistake. A big one, yes, but still just a mistake. You were deceived by someone who's had decades of practice at deception, and when you learned the truth, you did the right thing immediately. That's the daughter I raised." Tears filled her eyes again, but these seemed different. Cleansing rather than despairing. "I don't deserve you," she whispered. "You don't have to deserve love, baby. That's what makes it love." As we pulled up to my building, I noticed a small crowd gathered near the entrance. For a moment I tensed, wondering if it was reporters somehow already aware of Marcus's arrest. But as we got closer, I recognized familiar faces: Mrs. Taylor and her family, Reverend James, other members of our church community, some of whom had been victims of Marcus's original scheme. They were holding containers of food, flowers, balloons even, a welcome committee. Zora saw them too, and panic flashed across her face. "Mum, I can't face them, not after what Dad did, what I almost helped him do again." I turned to her, making sure she heard every word. "You are not your father, Zora Williams. You never have been. These people have known you since you were in diapers. They've watched you grow, celebrated your successes, prayed for you when times were hard. They're here because they love us. Both of us." She took a deep, shuddering breath, then nodded. As we stepped out of the car, Mrs. Taylor was the first to approach, her arms outstretched. Without hesitation, she embraced Zora, holding her tight as if she were her own grandchild. "You did good today, honey," I heard her murmur. "You helped make things right." One by one, the others came forward with hugs, words of encouragement, and reassurances that no one blamed her for her father's actions. The healing had already begun, not just for Zora and me, but for an entire community that had carried silent wounds for far too long. Later that evening, as we sat in my living room surrounded by food and flowers brought by our impromptu support network, Zora looked around with something like wonder on her face. "I forgot what this felt like," she said softly, "being part of something bigger than myself, something real." I knew exactly what she meant. In pursuing her career, striving for success in a world that rarely made space for women who looked like us, she'd gradually disconnected from the community that had helped raise her. It had made her vulnerable to Marcus's manipulation, yes, but it had also left a void that no amount of professional achievement could fill. "They never went anywhere," I told her. "They were always here, waiting for you to come home." As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Zora helped me clean up, moving around my kitchen with the familiar ease of someone returning to their rightful place. We worked in comfortable silence until she suddenly stopped, a dish towel clutched in her hands. "I need to say it properly," she said. her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "I'm sorry, Mom, for doubting you, for the terrible things I said, for trying to take what you worked so hard for all these years." Adridine, I set down the plate I was drying and turned to face her fully. "I accept your apology, Zora, and I hope you can forgive me too." Her brow furrowed in confusion. "For what?" "For not telling you the truth about your father sooner. For thinking I knew better than you what you could handle. You deserved the whole truth, even if it was painful." She considered this, then nodded slowly. "I forgive you too." A small smile tugged at her lips. "I guess we both learned something about honesty today." Indeed we did. Later that night, as Zora slept in her old bedroom down the hall, having insisted on staying with me rather than returning to her apartment, I sat alone in the living room, exhausted but unable to sleep. The events of the past 2 days kept replaying in my mind. The door slamming in my face, the discovery of the transfers, the confrontation and revelations, the arrests, the community gathering in support. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Michaels. "Thought you'd want to know. We found evidence linking M to 3 other similar schemes in different states. He won't be walking away this time." I set the phone down, a strange sense of peace washing over me. It wasn't satisfaction at Marcus's downfall. That path led nowhere good. Rather, it was the certainty that he could no longer hurt Zora or anyone else. The cycle was broken. Morning came with golden light streaming through my windows and the smell of coffee brewing. I found Zora in the kitchen, already dressed, making breakfast like she used to on weekend mornings during college breaks. "French toast," she announced as I entered, "with that cinnamon sugar mix Grandma used to make. You remembered the recipe." She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. Some things you never forget, no matter how far you wander. Over breakfast, we began the practical discussions. How to repair the financial damage, what her cooperation with the investigation would mean for her career, whether she should seek therapy to process everything that had happened. But beneath the logistics ran a current of something stronger, something that had been tested but ultimately strengthened by the ordeal we'd been through. "Whatever happens next," Zora said, reaching across the table to take my hand, "we face it together. No more secrets between us. No more letting anyone come between us." "Together," I agreed, squeezing her fingers gently. As she prepared to leave for her meeting with the firm's ethics committee, a difficult conversation, but one she was determined to face with complete honesty, she paused at the door, turning back to me with an expression of quiet determination I recognized from the mirror. "You know what I realized last night? All these years, I've been looking for something I already had. Searching for approval from a man who never earned the right to give it, when the person who truly believed in me was right here all along." She straightened her shoulders, standing tall, just as I'd taught her. "Today, I'm walking in there as your daughter, with all the strength and dignity that comes with it." Pride swelled in my chest, bringing fresh tears to my eyes. "You go show them exactly who you are, baby girl." "Away," and as she walked out the door, not slamming it this time, but closing it with gentle purpose, I knew without doubt that she would do exactly that. The daughter I had raised, the woman she had become, strong enough to face her mistakes, brave enough to make amends, wise enough to recognize true love when she saw it. That day they discovered who we really were, not just a mother and daughter, but a force that even the most calculated betrayal couldn't break apart. 2 black women standing tall together, unmovable, unbreakable, the way we were always meant to be.